My name is Ella. Standing here at the podium of the fundraising gala, looking out at the 150 faces before me, I can't help but cast my mind back to that fateful night that changed my life forever. It was a November evening, and I was halfway through my night shift at St. Mary's Hospital in Seattle. I was an ER nurse, and I'd grown accustomed to the sounds and chaos of the emergency room. But that night, everything came to a screeching halt. The charge nurse touched my shoulder and said, "Ella, break room.
Now."
I knew that tone. It was the one we reserved for delivering the worst news. I followed her down the corridor, my legs feeling like lead. Inside the break room, 2 state troopers stood. One held his hat against his chest, and the other couldn't meet my eyes. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "there's been an accident on Highway 99. Your husband, Ethan, had picked up your daughter, Ava, and son, Leo, from soccer practice. They were just 5 minutes from home. A man named Victor Harris, 38 years old, with a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit, ran a red light at 60 miles per hour and hit the passenger side of your car. Ethan died at the scene. Ava died in the ambulance. Leo made it to the hospital, my hospital, but I was in the break room when they brought him in. He was gone before I could reach the trauma bay. I don't remember sitting down. All I remember is the cold linoleum floor and the fluorescent light buzzing above me, as if it didn't know that my world had just ended. My coworker, Sarah, knelt beside me and held my hand. At some point, I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely unlock the screen. I called my mother, Helen. It was a primal instinct. When everything falls apart, you call your mom. The phone rang 4 times. I heard music and laughter in the background. My sister, Chloe, was having a house warming party. Then my mother picked up. "Hello, Ella. Make it quick. We're about to cut the cake." "Mom," my voice cracked. "Ethan is dead. Ava and Leo are dead. I need you." There was a long silence. I could hear the party behind her, people clinking glasses and laughing. Then my mother said, "Ella, I hear you. That's terrible. But today is Chloe's house warming. We have 20 people here. We can't just leave." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, thinking I must have misheard. "Mom, my husband, my children, they're gone." "I know, honey. But what do you want me to do right now? Chloe will be devastated if we leave her party. Call your friend, Sarah. She'll help you. I'll call you tomorrow." And then she hung up. I called my father, Richard, next. He picked up on the second ring. I could hear him stepping outside. "Dad, did Mom tell you?" There was a pause. "Yeah, kiddo. She mentioned it. We'll come see you next week. Hang in there." And he hung up, too. I called Chloe, but it went to voicemail. I left a message, but I don't remember what I said. 2 hours later, she texted back. "Mom told me. So sorry, call me TMRW." I sat on that hospital floor until my shift supervisor found me at midnight. 3 calls, 3 chances for my family to show up, and 3 doors slammed shut. Before that night, my life was simple and good. Ethan and I lived in a 2-bedroom house in Tacoma, about 30 minutes outside Seattle. He was a graphic designer at a small advertising firm. I worked the night shift at the hospital. We'd bought the house 3 years earlier with a small down payment and a lot of hope. Ava was 5. She had Ethan's blue eyes and my love for art. Leo was 3. He carried a stuffed dinosaur named Rex everywhere. We met because Ethan came into the ER with a broken arm after a skateboarding accident. He asked me if the cast would look cool, and I told him yes. He asked for my number anyway. That was Ethan. Warm, funny, and the kind of man who remembered your favorite movie after hearing you mention it once. In my family, I was the responsible one. I paid my own way through nursing school. I planned my own wedding, a small ceremony at the city hall, because my parents said they didn't have the budget for anything bigger. They had the budget for Chloe's expensive vacation the same year. Every holiday, I cooked, I cleaned, I bought the gifts. My mother never once asked how my shifts were going or whether Ava had started school. Her calls always opened with, "What are you bringing for dinner?" Ethan saw it before I did. One Christmas, after I'd spent 8 hours in my mother's kitchen, He turned to me and said, "Your family treats you like a servant, Ella." I said what I always said, "They're just like that. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. The funeral was on a Saturday, November 18th. It rained, a cold, steady Seattle rain that turned the cemetery grass into mud. Pastor David from the First Presbyterian Church presided. He'd baptized both Ava and Leo. When I told him what happened, he drove to my house at 5 o'clock in the morning with coffee and a binder full of options. He didn't ask about my family. He just said, "Tell me what they loved." Ava loved unicorns. Leo loved dinosaurs. Ethan loved the Beatles. So we played Let It Be, while the rain drummed against the tent canopy, and I stood in front of 3 caskets, one full-sized, 2 impossibly small, and tried to say goodbye to my entire world. My co-workers came, Sarah, Mike, and Dr. Johnson from the ER. They wore black scrubs under their coats because they'd come straight off shift. Tom, Ethan's college roommate, flew in from New York on a red-eye. He stood beside me the whole service, holding an umbrella over my head, even though his own shoulder was soaked. I put Rex inside Leo's casket. I clipped Ava's unicorn hairpin onto her pillow. I touched Ethan's hand one last time and whispered something I'll keep between us. Then I looked at the front row. The chairs reserved for family. Empty. All 4 of them. White folding chairs filled with rainwater. Not one member of my family was there. 1 week after the funeral, my mother called. "Ella, Christmas is next week. Are you bringing the turkey?" I held the phone away from my ear and stared at it. 3 caskets, 7 days, and my mother was asking about a turkey. "Mom, I just buried my family." "I know, honey. That's exactly why you need to be around people. Come for Christmas. It'll be good for you. Sitting alone in that house isn't healthy." I hung up.
"No explanation. No argument. First time in my life."
She called back 4 times. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. "Ella, this is ridiculous.
You cannot just shut people out.
Call me back." I stood in my kitchen, Ethan's coffee mug still on the counter, Ava's drawing of a unicorn still on the fridge, Leo's high chair still at the table. And I understood something with absolute clarity. If I went back to that Christmas table, I would never leave it. I would spend the rest of my life serving people who couldn't be bothered to attend my children's funeral. I typed one message into the family group chat. "I need space.
Please don't contact me.
I'll reach out when I'm ready." Then I set the phone down and waited. My mother's response came in 60 seconds. "This is unacceptable. You do not get to just disappear on this family." My father, 1 minute later. "Your mother is very upset. Please call her." Chloe, an hour later.
Wow. Okay.
"Guess I don't have a sister anymore."
Cool.
I blocked all 3 numbers. I muted the group chat. I sat on the edge of my bed in a house that still smelled like Ethan's cologne and let the silence settle around me like snow. The next morning, I called a therapist, Dr. Lisa. Her office was on Pine Street, a busy street in Seattle. In our first session, she asked, "When was the last time your family showed up for you?" I opened my mouth, closed it, and thought about birthdays, graduations, Ava's first steps, Leo's first word. The answer sat in my chest like a stone. Silence. I went back to work the following week. My colleagues covered for me without being asked. Sarah swapped shifts. Mike handled my charts.
Dr.
Johnson assigned me to lower acuity cases until I found my footing. One night, a DUI victim came in. 21 years old. A broken leg. I made it to the supply closet before my knees buckled. Tom called that same week. "Just checking in. How are you?" "Really?" "I'm surviving," I told him. "That's enough for now." Ethan's lawyer called me.
Tom said, "Mark Thompson.
He needs to talk to you about some paperwork Ethan filed." I didn't know Ethan had a lawyer. Mark's office was on the 3rd floor of a building in downtown Seattle. He was a middle-aged man with a kind face and a firm handshake. "Ethan and I went to college together," he said, sitting down. "We stayed in touch. He came to see me about 9 months before the accident. Around the time, he had started locking his home office door for an hour every Sunday evening. I'd assumed he was working. Mark slid a manila envelope across the desk. Ethan purchased a term life insurance policy 9 months before the accident. $5 million. You are the sole beneficiary. Because the policy was less than 2 years old, the carrier did a routine investigation. It took about 5 months, but everything checked out. Ethan was in perfect health when he applied. The accident was caused entirely by the other driver, and there was no question about the claim. The funds are ready for disbursement. I didn't move. The number didn't register at first. It was too large, too foreign. $5 million. He was making good money at the firm. Excellent health, non-smoker, 32 years old. The premiums were manageable. Mark paused. He told me about your family situation, Ella. Not in detail. He just said, if something happens to me, she'll be alone. Her family won't help her. I need to know she's covered. There was a letter inside the envelope. Ethan's handwriting, the messy scrawl I used to tease him about. I didn't read it in the office. That felt too public, but Mark told me the last line. You always take care of everyone else. Let me take care of you this one last time. I pressed the envelope against my chest and cried. This was different from the hollow, shocked crying on the hospital floor. This was warm. This was the grief of being loved so completely by someone who knew that the people who should have protected me never would. I didn't touch the money for weeks after it cleared. It sat in an escrow account while I stared at the ceiling every night, trying to figure out what a person does with $5 million that arrived because her family died. Spending it on myself felt wrong. Saving it felt hollow.
Dr.
Lisa was the one who cracked it open. What would Ethan want you to do with this? I thought about that for a long time. I thought about the 21-year-old DUI victim in my ER, the one whose mother sat in the waiting room for 5 hours in the same clothes she'd been wearing when the police showed up at her door. I thought about the nights after Ethan's funeral when I couldn't sleep and Googled financial help for families of drunk, driving victims and found almost nothing in Washington. I thought about sitting alone in that cemetery in the rain. No family should face what I faced alone, I said. The idea took shape slowly, then all at once. A foundation, not a memorial plaque or a bench in a park. Something that worked, that paid for funerals when families couldn't afford them, that covered rent for the first 3 months of shock, that connected survivors with grief counselors who actually returned their calls. I phoned Mark that evening. I want to start a foundation in Ethan's name and Ava's and Leo's. I'll set it up. 501c3, he said. We'll do this right. I kept a portion for myself, enough to pay off the mortgage, build an emergency fund, and breathe without panic. Ethan would have insisted. He was
practical like that.
What I didn't know was that this decision, made in a therapist's office on a Tuesday afternoon, would eventually land on the front page of a newspaper. And that front page would reach a house in Bellevue, where a woman named Helen was about to discover that the daughter she dismissed had become someone she couldn't ignore. While I built the foundation, the truth was building something of its own. In a town like Tacoma, nothing stays secret. People talk at the diner. They talk after church. They talk in the checkout line at the grocery store. And the question that kept circling back was a simple one. Where was Ella's family? Pastor David never said a word publicly.
He didn't need to.
He'd presided over a funeral with 3 caskets and an empty front row. People noticed. People remembered. It started small. Helen was at the church potluck in January when Mrs. Anderson from the women's group asked, "How's Ella doing? We heard about the accident. Just awful." My mother smiled. Her fake smile. "She's doing fine. Just needs some time." Then Mr. Brown, our neighbor of 15 years, asked the question Helen wasn't ready for. "Were you at the funeral, Helen?"
"I didn't see you.
We had a family commitment that day." Mr. Brown looked at her, didn't blink, didn't nod, just looked. Then he picked up his plate and moved to another table. Chloe felt it, too. Her friends started asking about me. She gave them the script. "My sister is being dramatic." She cut us off for no reason. It worked until someone asked the follow-up. "Wait, you didn't go to the funeral?" Chloe had no good answer for that. My mother called my father into the kitchen one evening. I know this because my father told me later in a text message I wasn't expecting. Helen stood at the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight. We need to get Ella back before this gets worse. People are talking. Not, we need to apologize. Not, we were wrong. Not, our grandchildren are dead, and we didn't say goodbye. People are talking. That was what mattered. By March, for months after the accident, the foundation paperwork was nearly complete. Mark had filed the 501c3 application. I drafted a mission statement at my kitchen table at 3 in the morning, still in scrubs, with Ethan's letter propped against the salt shaker. I had a name, the Thompson Family Foundation. I also had a purpose. And for the first time since November, I woke up in the morning with a reason to get out of bed that wasn't just obligation. Meanwhile, my mother was busy too. Helen had a network, church friends, neighborhood acquaintances, a cousin in Seattle who heard things from a paralegal who knew a financial planner. Word traveled the way it always does in small-town Washington. Slowly, then everywhere at once. Someone mentioned at a fellowship dinner that Ella Thompson had received a significant insurance payout. Someone else mentioned the word foundation. By the time the information reached Helen, it had been rounded up and polished into something irresistible. Ethan left her money, Helen told my father. In a lot. How much? Richard asked. Enough that she's starting some kind of charity. I can picture my father in that moment, sitting in his recliner, beer on the armrest, staring at the muted television, doing the math, not the emotional math, the financial math. Maybe we should call her, he said. But Helen was smarter than a phone call. She knew I'd blocked them, so she went to Pastor David instead. Pastor, my daughter is grieving, and she's pushing everyone away. We're worried about her. Could you help us bring the family together? Maybe a prayer meeting, something gentle. Pastor David listened. He nodded slowly. I'll think about it, Helen. But later that night, alone in his study, David sat with the memory of 3 caskets and 4 empty chairs, and he thought very carefully about what gentle meant to a woman like Helen. 2 weeks later, Tom called. Ella, I pitched a feature to my editor about DUI victim advocacy in Washington. I disclosed that Ethan was a friend. She approved it on the condition that I focus on the systemic angle, not just your story. But your foundation is the centerpiece. DUI victim advocacy in Washington. What exists? What doesn't? Where the gaps are, your foundation fits perfectly. Would you be open to an interview? I hesitated. Publicity wasn't something I'd ever sought. I was a night shift ER nurse. My idea of public speaking was reading triage notes to an attending at 4 a.m. But Tom wasn't asking me to perform. He was asking me to tell the truth. And the truth was the only thing I had left that still felt solid. Okay, I said, but I'm not doing this for attention. I know. That's why it matters. We met at a coffee shop near the hospital. Tom set up a recorder between our mugs and let me talk. I told him about Ethan, the broken arm, the cool, cast question, the Sunday evenings behind a locked office door that turned out to be insurance research. I told him about Ava's unicorns and Leo's dinosaurs. I told him about the foundation and the 3 families we'd already identified for our first round of support. Then he asked the question, You organized the funeral alone? I stirred my coffee. Ethan's friends were there. My co-workers, my pastor. Tom waited. He was good at silence. My birth family wasn't. He didn't press. He just wrote it down. Before he left,